Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 284, cover dated January 1992. So the cover by Whilce Portacio and Art Thibert, featuring the X-Men Gold Team in, as it turns out, a reflection on this helmet here. So we've got Storm, Colossus, Iceman, and Archangel, but it kind of doesn't work because Archangel's wing overlays the title of the comic X-Men there. And it's kind of hard to read this in terms of what it is because of the coloring choices. The red color here, tough to make out what's going on and that this is a helmet. But here it's a little clearer to see Portacio's design for these armored figures, and very obviously reminiscent of the Predator design. And then in a tearaway here we have Bishop and his deputies Malcolm and Randall, and our cover captions ask what lies beyond the void, and also the mutant Bishop makes his move. So Bishop turns up at the end of this comic in a type of epilogue. So let's open it up, and who we have surprisingly featured here is none other than Sunfire. So it is Shiro Yoshida, one of the original, all new, all different X-Men from Giant Size X-Men number 1, but who didn't play along well with the other X-Men team members or take well to Professor X ordering him around. So he never was a part of that original 70s X-Men team. But here he is on this page getting a new costume design, and it's all mysterious in terms of what it's for until we turn over the page and we see that there is a team of Japanese and Russian scientists who are observing this crater which is exuding mysterious energies, and Sunfire's job is to use his power amplified and focused by the new costume to shoot it at the crater and I guess see what happens then. So the creative team for this issue, plotted in pencil by Whilce Portacio, inked by Art Thibert, with some assistance by Scott Williams and Carl Alstadter. They show up at the end of the issue, working on the Bishop pages. And we have a script by John Byrne, so he's supplying the words here. Letters by Michael Heisler, and colors by Glynis Oliver and Joe Rosas. So let's continue and see what happens. So Sunfire gets ready to strike the crater with his focused energy, and it seems to be working, but then this scientist says that his readings are going off the scale, and that somehow or other the crater is adapting its own frequencies to match Sunfire's and return fire. So there is an emergency here, and then the scene switches to the X-Men Gold Team, picking up from the action at the end of the previous issue, where they are aboard the Blackbird plane and they are returning home to the X-Mansion from their adventure at the Arctic and Trevor Fitzroy's lair there. And we have this little moment here where it turns out that Colossus's nose is broken and it's affecting the sound of his voice. We got to see here Iceman in his Jim Lee designed costume, and there's some discussion of what happened to Jean, her experience dying but transferring her psyche into the corpse of the White Queen, and Professor X is determined to investigate some more, and he wants to psychically enter the White Queen's corpse. The language here used of the White Queen is that she's dead, but the Forge's equipment is keeping her body in stasis, so she's not rotting, but she is dead according to all sensors. So Professor X is determined to go in because there's a mystery for him. He didn't feel the White Queen's death, and he says, since it is unlikely a psychic as powerful as she could have been forever silenced without my sensing it, yet I felt nothing, just as I did not feel Jean's quote-unquote death. So there's a mystery there, and he goes in psychically into the White Queen's body with Jean assisting him, but they find nothing. But Professor X says, no, for a moment I thought that maybe there was something there. But then Forge intercepts a distress call on his worldwide frequency monitor. It's garbled, a distress call coming from somewhere off coastal Japan, and something about maybe an alien invasion he's getting. So Storm says it's unquestionably a distress call. She orders Forge to reactivate the stasis field around Emma Frost's corpse. We'll finish the examination when time allows, but it's her decision that people need help, so the X-Men should go investigate what's happening at the source of the distress call. And then our scene switches back to the Japanese island, and we see the aftermath of the blast emerging from the crater. And there are these three figures who've emerged from the crater, and we're told in the narrative captions that Sunfire recovers consciousness, waking in time to see the last desperate stand of his Soviet allies as they fall before the mysterious invaders. And what happens then is that we get a look at these invaders more closely in this anchor image here, and we get to see Portacio's design for them. As I said earlier, something of a mix between, involving or incorporating ideas from the Predator's armor, and also maybe a little bit of cyberpunk going on as well. And they attack Sunfire, but it's a mystery as regards why, who they are. And what happens then, of course, is just as this particular figure is about perhaps to kill Sunfire with this blade, the X-Men Gold Team arrive in the nick of time. So we've got Storm, Archangel, and Jean Grey there jumping out of the Blackbird. And what happens is Archangel zeroes in on one of the armored figures, and we got this interesting piece of dialogue from the armored figure who says, "I find your own misshapen features no more pleasing to the eye than you find mine." So there seems to be a misunderstanding here, maybe by John Byrne scripting this. And according to Byrne himself, he was getting these pages out of order. He was getting the pages and having to turn around a script in 24 hours or less. So the whole thing was rushed and there was poor communication. So it seems he thought that these truly were alien figures, but we're going to learn later on that who or what is inside these, the armor is humanoid. So this kind of dialogue doesn't make any sense ultimately as the issue progresses. And as I said, all bespeaking the kind of chaotic circumstances in which these comics were created, a lot of rushing going on and last minute dialoguing and scripting on Byrne's part. So then it turns out the X-Men have held Colossus in reserve, and Colossus now enters the fray, knocking out one of these, actually two of the armored figures. So Forge is triumphant there, that shook him up. He says they're pulling back, and then Sunfire grabs Colossus and flies him away. At this point, Storm has been thinking about and observing what's going on, and she regards the armored beings as not necessarily monsters, which is what Colossus regards them as. She says here, as savage and unrelenting as these creatures may be, still I heard the ring of compassion in the alien tones of the one when he thought his companion critically injured. Warriors these beings no doubt are. The bodies of their victims attest to that, but we must be careful how we judge them, lest we fall victim to the very prejudice against which we must ever battle. So a little bit of a shoehorning in of one of the key themes of the X-Men books by Byrne here in Storm's Thoughts, and then we're back to the action with Iceman laying down an ice wall to keep the figures back at the edge of the crater. But Storm is intent that they that she wants to get answers as to why these figures are fighting so hard to protect the crater. So then aboard the Blackbird, Forge sets off a battery of missiles, but they're set to stun rather than destroy. And the figures, instead of attacking Storm, as she observes, they attack the missiles. And as she thinks they're concentrating on protecting the pit, even at the cost of their own lives. Of course, none of these are being killed because, as Forge said, they're set for concussion only. So then if we continue with the issue, we see here that the pit itself erupts with no, it's not the pit that erupts, but rather this figure here, the person's armor blows up, and this one atop the crater is blasted out of, as it turns out, her armor. Sunfire says it's a girl, barely more than a child. So Jean is trying to get a read on the person's mind, but it's an alien mind as she experiences it, so she's not able to use her telepathy 100%. Nice storytelling here by Portacio, getting all these figures in the panel and also the Blackbird setting down. And then what we learn from the girl is that she tells them they've caused their own doom. Get away, flee while you can. There is almost no time. I can feel the energy in the pit, feel it building. Soon, very soon, it will open. So then it does open, and she says she wasn't trying to protect the pit. She was fighting to protect your world, and now the pit blasts open. And what happens is everyone, including the X-Men, are sucked into this mysterious pit, the void. Yes, and Storm here wondering about whether they're truly doomed or not. And it seems that way in this image here, as Forge says the crater's become some sort of black hole. There's a gravimatrix flux going right off the scale. He can barely keep the Blackbird on an even keel. It's a dimensional vortex and sucking in the whole landscape for miles around. And Professor X has no telepathic trace of the X-Men. It is as if they vanished from the face of the earth. And if that vortex continues to expand at its present rate, within a matter of days, all the world will join them. So bit of a cliffhanger ending there in terms of what's become of the X-Men. And of course, next issue we'll find out. But then the scene switches to from one hemisphere to another. So back to presumably North America, maybe Canada perhaps. We don't get an exact location here. But it turns out there are these strangers to this place, strangers to this time. These are some of these future criminals that Fitzroy brought on a one-way trip to our time, and they've been tracked to this small village by, as it turns out here, Bishop, Malcolm, and Randall. So if I turn over the page, we see that these guys are being observed, but we also learn that they have killed this particular girl here. Some of the dialogue here, you'll never be as sweet a sight as my lost little quail. He's got these Polaroids of this girl. Neither will she, not anymore, not unless you're even sicker than I think. So these nasty pieces of work have done something terrible in the little village where they are, but they've been tracked by Bishop and his deputies. And so Bishop is going to exact justice here. And just to note, by the way, I should have made that note, that the inking here on these pages, this page and this page here, not by Art Thibert. These two pages are by Karl Alstadter, as far as I can make out. And in addition, this page here is definitely by Scott Williams. And one of the trademarks that gives it away is not just the style of cross-hatching and line making, but in particular, you can see it here, the fine hairs on Bishop's forearms. That's one of Scott Williams's trademark styles in respect of his inking. And we're going to see it missing on the next page, but it's there. So this page definitely inked by Scott Williams. So Bishop gives these guys an opportunity to turn themselves over to the proper authorities. Of course they say no, and then basically he, Malcolm and Randall blast them away, and it's implied kill them. So Bishop orders Randall to go check the huts, see if there's anyone needs our help. So they do that, and this is our last page coming up here. I turn the page, whoops. Here we go. Yeah, so no, they've turned the hut into a charnel house. We can see these bodies hanging from the rafters, and no survivors, says Randall. They went through this installation like they did Harmony Base, men and women both. It's the worst I've seen. So Bishop concludes, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. We have no exact figures on how many Fitzroy pulled through from our timeline. We only know they'll behave no differently here than they did in the future, and that's why we have to be as cold, as cruel, as utterly heartless as they are, if humankind has any hope of surviving. So that's Bishop and Malcolm and Randall's mission for the upcoming issues, what they'll be up to, hunting down those future criminals and executing them. And this particular page, just a final note here, this is inked by Karl Alstadter as well. So we've got one page by Williams, Scott Williams, and the other three by Karl Alstadter here, helping out Art Thibert on the inks for this issue. And another indication of the tightness of the deadline, trying to turn this material around and get it to the printers. So a nice little inset there of Sunfire in his new outfit designed by Portacio. So I do hope that you enjoyed this video review of Uncanny X-Men 284. If you did, please like the video. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.